There were 3 well-known characters left at the wall at the end of Season 7. Tormund, Beric, and Edd. Hopefully you didn't forget about Edd. But yeah, these are characters that we have been and should be very worried about, since out of all of the characters that matter, they're the closest in proximity to the Army of the Dead, and they're basically the first line of defense against it. I wanted to make a video about these 3 characters because of one tiny piece of spoiler news that I encountered during my research. I actually have mentioned this piece of spoiler news before in my timeline video, but after I finished making that video and I reread the line a few times, something just hit me. And yeah, you can tell me, no Val, you're reading too much into it, you're going crazy with the wait for Season 8, whatever you want, but I could swear that I found a hidden meaning here, so I had to make a video about it. Let me tell you what it is and you guys can let me know your thoughts in the comments. You're now watching Because Geek. The last time we saw Tormund and Beric, the wall was crumbling under their feet. So, of course, speculations ran wild about a potential off-screen death for them. And even though we barely saw Edd in one scene, we were left with similar questions about him. Thankfully, we have confirmation from filming news that both Christopher Hivju, who plays Tormund, and Ben Crompton, who plays Edd, were back on set filming scenes for Season 8. So that confirms that we will see them again, and debunks the off-screen death speculation. We haven't heard anything at all about Richard Dormer, who plays Beric, or at least not that I know of, but it's hard to believe that he wouldn't be back, judging by the fact that his character still has to fulfill his foreshadowed purpose. I mean, I hope you will agree with me that helping Jon capture a white was not the reason the Lord of Light brought him back 6 times. So I think it's safe to assume that we will see Beric again as well. But what will happen to them? Well, in another video I mentioned that Brothers of the Night's Watch were doing stunt training for a scene, which tells us that we will likely see them fighting. We don't know if this fight scene happens at Eastwatch or at Castle Black, but the only thing left for the Night's Watch to fight in Season 8 is Whites, so we can assume that the fight will be against Whites. And since the whole army of Whites was at Eastwatch the last time we saw it, then I would guess that this fight scene will happen there, and that Tormund and Beric will be the ones involved and not Edd. Who knows though, the writers can really make anything work, and since we know 100% that we will see Edd again, it's not impossible to see him involved in this fight somehow. But going back to my question of what will happen to them, yeah, that fight scene is really the only clear hint that we have. But even if we can't answer that question, what matters here is that anything that happens at the wall will be hard to survive. So things are looking pretty bleak for these 3 characters one way or another. The only one that really needs to survive is Beric, so he can fulfill his purpose, which most of us are expecting has to do with someone who is not currently at the wall. I'm telling you all of this because it all fits in quite well with the hidden meaning that I found in the spoiler news. I'll stop beating around the bush and tell you what it is now. Do you remember this report from the A Song of Ice and Fire blog called Los Siete Reinos? It's a Spanish blog, so I'm translating it, but it says that the Night King will show his army from the start of the season. But by episode 3, his numbers will have grown to a staggering amount, and among these newly resuscitated and recruited Whites, there will be more wildlings and members of the Night's Watch. It sounds like a pretty straightforward and obvious thing to say, right? But what if it isn't? Think about it. The Army of the Dead already has wildlings and members of the Night's Watch in it, and they're all played by no-name characters who are played by extras who have no recognizable faces. So if you were to add more unrecognizable faces to this army, like they're saying it's going to happen, how in the world would you know that they're new faces if you can't recognize who they are? If the actors are different, they could have just hired new extras to play the same Whites. Are you following what I'm saying? The only way for anyone to know that there are new wildlings and members of the Night's Watch in the Army of the Dead is if you could recognize their faces. And if you can, then that means that they're recognizable characters. Like Edd and Tormund. Why not Beric? Well, because he's not a wildling or a member of the Night's Watch, which, like I mentioned, fits with him needing to survive. So could that report really be telling us that we will see Edd and Tormund as Whites? Maybe the source didn't want to be super explicit with the spoiler and that's why they only said new wildlings and members of the Night's Watch. Well, it really depends on how the information was obtained for that report. If it came from someone who knew the script, or someone who was present when they were filming a scene where they saw wildlings and Night's Watch brothers dying and waking up as Whites, then they wouldn't need to recognize their faces to know that the army has new recruits. But when you read the rest of the report, it doesn't really sound like this was the way the information was obtained. Let me read you the next part. So again, the Night King will show his army from the start of the season, but by episode 3 his numbers will have grown to a staggering amount, and among these newly resuscitated and recruited whites, there will be more wildlings and members of the Night's Watch. Then it says, the scenes they filmed for that episode in the last few days involved the army slowly advancing amidst bonfires, and the location was in the area near Magaramorn. Name Butcher! So I just contacted my Irish friend Erin, who lives in Northern Ireland, to ask her how to pronounce Magaramorn. And according to her, it's Machermorn. I hope I said that right. But yeah, there you go, Name Butcher. Thanks, Erin. And the location was in the area near Machermorn, which we've mentioned before. Notice how it says the army, as if referring to something that was said in a previous sentence. This makes me believe that the two paragraphs belong to the same spoiler and the same source of info, and there is no mention of the source witnessing any fighting scenes, where men could have died and woken up as whites. They only mention the army slowly advancing. So if the source of info claimed that this advancing army had new wildlings and Brothers of the Night's Watch in it, it's gotta be because they recognize the new faces, right? Also, just to clarify, Machermorn is an area where they built a huge green screen. And it's very close to the Castle Black set, but it's a completely different set. So at least we know that this wasn't filmed at Castle Black. But what do you guys think? Will we see Edd and Tormund as new recruits for the Army of the Dead, while Beric survives? Or am I just going crazy here? Who isn't though, right? I think as long as we're having fun, that's all that matters. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Leave a like if you liked it, subscribe for more, click on the bell so you get notified about my new videos, and I will see you